Good evening, good evening, good evening, good evening, good evening to you. Welcome to WeatherBrains episode number 836. It's the pre-show, that magical time of the program where we do three things. We share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and we say outrageous things from time to time. So I forgot my little AirPods, so have to use the speaker. Hopefully this is not going to foul things up here, but that's okay. We will make this work. We will always make this thing fly. Back in Studio A tonight. Last couple of weeks I was at Studio S, the home studio, but we are now back in the building here in the WeatherBrains corporate headquarters, as we affectionately call this place. But this is where I get the guest on the show and get the regulars on the show, and we just air it out. The regular produced show begins in about 10 minutes. So let's see if we can find anybody to join us tonight. I know we got a lot of folks that are out, and we've also got the AMS annual meeting in progress, and that's we were going to have some of our folks live from the annual meeting, but obviously it's gone virtual this year, so it's going to be a little different. We'll talk about that. I think it started today. Maybe the student conference started yesterday, but let me try and invite some of our regulars on here and see who we can stir up. I do know that Dr. Jacobs is out. His voice is out. He's not feeling well. In fact, I think he presented today at an AMS session. Of course, all of this is, virtual online. And I think his voice just basically gave out. So I know that he is out this evening. I believe Aubrey is out. Troy is out. I think Rick is out. Question is, who's in? Maybe it's just me. I think Jen is here, and I think Bill is here. And we will make this thing fly. By the way, this is for the 24th of January, 2022. This time of the year, we always have big tornado anniversaries down here in the southern U.S. We had a big anniversary yesterday. Had a horrible pre-dawn tornado day, January 23rd of 2012. Two people died in the pre-dawn hours, both in the Birmingham metro here. And one was a 16-year-old girl, Christina Heichelbeck, who lived in a suburb of Birmingham called Clay. And again, that whole episode 10 years ago is a reminder that we've got to get people away from siren dependency. That's killed more people than anything else. And then tomorrow is an anniversary of a tornado that occurred in Fultondale, which is a Birmingham suburb, 1 year ago. Bill Murray is in one of his upscale hotels this evening.
This is actually the lowest of all the upscale hotels I stay in.
Well, that looks nice to me. I mean, it didn't look like a roach.
I know it's it's actually my favorite. And it's the lowest level Hilton there is.
So what? I don't know anything about the hotel. What's it called? What's the brand?
It's called a True.
True.
Mm-hmm. And it's
okay.
The lowest priced Hilton brand. It's very simple, but it's, very, very nice, nice, non-carpeted floors, simple, big old television.
Well, let's just cut right to the chase. Do they have a waffle machine?
They do have a waffle machine. Well, no, they have a pancake machine, James. They're trying to zig while the other Hiltons zag. This one has a pancake machine.
Okay. Well, that'll work.
But this is the room tour right here, so you can see. There's my room. All that for about $109 a night.
So are you in Walla Walla? You were in Goodland, Kansas? Are you in Pittsburgh?
Manassas, Virginia.
Okay. You didn't take a wrong turn at Albuquerque, did you?
No, I took the train. And,
so who said took the wrong turn in Albuquerque? What cartoon is that from? Does anybody remember?
Oh, I don't even remember that. I remember funny. Point me in the direction of Albuquerque.
Jen's got it. Say it, Jen.
What'd you say, Jen?
It was Bugs Bunny.
Yes.
He did not, but he said Albuquerque probably.
Yes. Took a wrong turn in Albuquerque.
I'm so glad to see Dr. Neal
Me
Yeah,
too.
he's here.
Yeah, we'll see how long I can last.
Aw.
Oh,
My voice is probably
you got the
sounding a little
Omni.
rough.
the
Yeah,
Omni.
I went. My kids brought it home from school last week, and I told people, I said, "Watch, I'm going to get sick on Friday." And when Friday rolled around, I thought I somehow managed to avoid it, and then
Yeah,
Saturday
yeah.
afternoon, I started to go downhill.
Aw.
Yeah, I had to run the gauntlet tonight. About 86 Cobra Kai kids in the building where our temporary office is. And I was like, oh, I'm just going to hold my breath and hope.
There's no escaping it. It's
No,
coming
don't
for
even
you.
tell me. Ugh.
But
It-
I feel like I'm rounding the bend, so hopefully AMS will still be okay. I had to give one talk today and almost didn't make it through the talk, but drank a bunch of lemon tea so I could come on the show tonight and have a voice at least for a little while.
Yeah.
We
that
are
works.
honored.
Hi, Kim.
Hi guys.
Good to see
I'm
you.
rounding.
Yay!
I am doing this. At least I'm just gonna do it hour by hour, but I at least think I should be good for the first hour.
Paul's like, I didn't sign up for hours. I signed up for hour. Hey, Paul, can you hear us okay?
I do. Hello, everybody.
Hi, Paul.
Nice.
I see a
nice to
Fleetwood
meet you all.
Mac album back there. Is that going to be hit? You can play that on the turntable later?
Yeah, I can
Like the-
fire that up if you need me to. It's a classic.
That's Rumors by Fleetwood Mac.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Cool.
Uh-oh, what is James going to show here?
Anybody knows what this one is right here?
It's gotta
Kiss!
be a Kiss
Yes.
album.
Kiss.
Yeah.
Look at that.
I remember when one of my friends snuck me a Kiss album over in 1975, and I thought I was like breaking some taboo somewhere.
From Casablanca Records, vinyl.
I love
How'd you get
vinyl.
that?
Awesome.
Were you a
Beautiful.
Kiss fan, James, in your day?
Here's this song
It's an
I
old DJ
played.
here,
This
Paul.
is the actual record I played my first night on the AM radio in November of 1973.
Atlantic
until you-
Records.
Until You Come Back to Me by Aretha Franklin.
Oh,
And it's got
sweet.
the original labels, the format. I mean, it's just magic. The radio station where I worked on 15th Street in Tuscaloosa, they were going to tear it down, and they had a bunch of this stuff in there. And we got in there and took some old transmitter logs and records, and we just didn't want it to be burned up. So we took some collector's items for those of us that used to work there for so long. All right, so we have to wait until the top of the hour to get the show started.
Yeah, we got one more guest here too, but I don't see him. He was
Uh-oh.
running from a faculty meeting, I think.
Um,
But it may be, Paul, you may end up being the only guest when it's all said and done here.
Well, I'm honored to be here and good to meet you all. And James, you as well for all your great work over the decades.
oh, I'm just old, but thank you, Paul.
Oh, no.
Here's how old I am. I forgot my little earphones, the AirPods, so I'm having to use my speaker. So I'm having to leave the speaker down really low. So somebody says something, I miss it. I'm just riding through this one here. I've been at home for the last 2 weeks, and I had to, I'm back at the TV station tonight, so had to pack up stuff, and I just forgot that little white case with the headphones, the AirPods in there. But at the top of the hour, the TV station will join us, which is in about 20 or 30 seconds, and then we'll get this thing started.
Well, if we don't hear
Nobody's-
from Dr. Businger, we'll just grill Paul for 45 minutes.
Sure, that's
Sounds
Oh
good.
boy.
Get ready. It's all the hard questions coming your way, Paul.
when did the AMS start? Was that yesterday or today?
I believe it was yesterday,
Okay.
but I could be off.
Yeah, technically it kicks off with the presidential forum, which is on Sunday afternoon now. So, yep, technically off and running as of yesterday. And today was the first day of sort of the regular conference sessions.
Okay,
research
let's
talks and
hold
stuff.
it for the show here. See, the problem is we start getting to the good stuff in the pre-show. So, and it's the top of the hour. Welcome to our friends watching on television. We're going to record the audio tracks and get this show underway. Track 1 and track 2 are looking good. All right. So here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Join the American Meteorological Society by becoming a member of the band. The AMS Weather Band is a global community of weather enthusiasts dedicated to learning and sharing their love of science. Visit amsweatherband.org to learn more and join the band today.
Hey, WeatherBrains, episode number 836, the weekly show all about weather. This is for the 24th of January, 2022. And you know what's coming up? Bill Murray, in like a few days, it's our anniversary. We started WeatherBrains in late January of 2006, which means we were about to turn 16 years old.
We can get our driver's license. Yay.
Exactly. And they said it would never last, and we're still here. Wow. So
never tell us no, right, James man?
Yes, right. We might not be the best weather show in the world, but we're the longest running weather show in the world. Look who's back, Kim. It is our heart is jumping for joy that you're back. It's just that we have a new ambiance, a new countenance here that you're back. Welcome.
Oh, it's so good to be with you guys. It's been a couple of rough weeks here at the McLean house, but today I think we have actually sort of studied the waters and I'm able to be with you. So just really excited to be back. You guys had some really great homegrown shows and I missed being able to weigh in on those. But I did get to see at least the first one and that was a terrific show. You guys really carried it.
Which even Jen got a rant going on that show. I have never seen Jen have a little mini rant. She's so there's not a mean bone in her body. I mean, she just that is not her nature, but she tried to work one up that night. It was outstanding, Jen. So thank you for your rant that night.
Thank you, James. I'm so glad I made you proud.
So how are you?
Good.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say really quickly, there's something about being a panelist on WeatherBrains, and be careful of this, Jen. It brings out the rant in us. So, you know, you think Jen doesn't have opinions, but just wait.
I do have some opinions, but I try to be as nice as I can about it. But no, I'm good. I am a little irritated because yesterday I went out and I had to shovel 2 inches of snow, and 24 hours later I had to go back out and shovel 2 inches of snow again. And so I'm a little irritated with that pattern. But on the bright side, I got a haircut and I needed it 4 inches off. And it's a weight lifted. I feel so much better. So I think it was causing me to have some, busy head because I had so much weight on my head. But no, I'm doing good up here in Ohio and just trying to stay warm. It's cold up here.
For some here on the show, Jen, we have no sympathy on the hair deal. I mean, I'm sorry. It just doesn't mean much to us.
Okay.
So Dr. Neil Jacobs is in the game and he's playing injured. I mean, that's a trooper right there. Dr. Jacobs, you have been fighting a virus.
Yeah, I got the Omicron. It was inevitable. My kids went back to school in person 2 weeks ago, and I told my wife, I said, we've got 5 days before we all get taken out. I missed that by 6 days. And then, of course, it was another few days before they got me. And I managed to get up to DC before it hit me. So now I'm kind of stuck here. But I got to say, as much as I complained about AMS going all virtual, I would rather be in my apartment or my house than a hotel room somewhere. So
I think there's no doubt that was the right decision. It's never easy making that decision, but looking at you as just one case study here, I think that's the right thing. And you actually presented today, right?
I did. I got up this morning and drank a whole bunch of Dayquil and then struggled through my raspy talk on it was about Bill LaPenta's mentorship of me and his legacy and all the stuff he's done for the community, and shy of being dead, which I've already done once. I was not going to miss that talk, but I lost my voice and then spent the rest of the afternoon sipping lemon tea, hoping I could get back for this.
You, sir, are a trooper, and thank you for being here. That's it ran through our house about 10 days ago. My wife had it, and of course, I tested positive, but I had zero symptoms. I mean, none. So we went through the multiple days, and I've been very blessed in this whole thing. So, Bill Murray, have you got the Rona? Are you okay?
No, so far, other than probably having what was the beginning of it in February 2020, I've made it through just fine so far. So I may have had it. Everyone in my home had it the week I was in Virginia 2 weeks ago. So I either just missed it or I got it like you, James, and was asymptomatic.
Yeah. And let's mention, too, we do have some of the regulars out tonight. We have Troy that is out. We have Aubrey that is out. We have Rick that is out. They'll be back with us next week. But I'll turn the floor over to you, and you can bring in our guests.
Yeah, James, I'm really excited about tonight's guest. He is the chief meteorologist for NPR News. James, you always love to make fun of us who love NPR. Do you know what NPR is?
M like Mary, Papa Romeo.
Yes.
NPR.
Do you know what it is?
No.
Minnesota Public Radio.
Well, I should.
How's that, James, for being forward thinking? NPR
like
has a chief meteorologist.
NPR.
Well, and tonight he is with us. Paul Hutner is the chief meteorologist. He actually is a friend of one of my clients in the hotel business, and who lives in Minnesota. And mentioned this to me, and I said we got to have Paul on the show. So, Paul, we finally made it happen. I'm glad you're here tonight.
Oh, it's a pleasure and an honor, Bill. Thank you so much. And James, great to meet you. And I've been following, of course, all your great work, keeping the folks in Alabama ahead of tornadoes and severe weather and educating them over these decades. And it's only going to be about 13 below up here tonight. So not too bad up in Minnesota this evening.
A real heat wave, huh?
Yeah.
Well, you're no stranger to cold weather there, certainly in Minnesota. And some shockingly cold weather at times. We get what we think is cold weather, and things happen that we don't expect, but nothing like that. But tell us how you got started in the industry. Most of us have this epiphany moment or something when we're young, and talk about how you got into weather.
Well, I had one of those too. When I was 4 years old in 1965, we had the biggest tornado outbreak in the history of the Twin Cities on May 6th. 1965.
So not the Palm Sunday outbreak, but
right. We had 6 tornadoes that skipped across the greater Twin Cities, and I remember this vividly. It's literally my first living memory. I was home. My older brothers and sister came home after school that day. The storms were coming in. The sky turned green. It began hailing, hail chunks as big as your fist, and we were kind of a family of weather geeks. So we were out there picking up these hailstones with my brother's football helmets on and putting them in bowls so we could get them in the freezer for further analysis later, right? And all of a sudden the back screen door flies open and my mom comes out screaming, "You kids get inside. Your father called. He said there's a tornado coming." And my father worked at the Minneapolis City Courthouse near where all the police were, and they had the radio traffic and the scanners. And there was a tornado sighted about 5 miles southwest of where we lived. And so we all ran down into the basement, looked out that basement window. And I remember seeing these huge 100-year-old maple trees just dancing in the wind and the sky swirling. That tornado was an EF4 tornado that passed about just a half mile west of our home and pretty much leveled a chunk of that neighborhood. And so when I went and saw that the next day, I just said, I got to know what did this. And that was the day that I caught the weather bug.
That's amazing. And we all have those similar type experiences. James, do I know what your experience is? What was your epiphany moment?
When I wanted to do weather for a living?
Was it because of your teacher in school, or was it?
Well, I got the little, I've always loved weather. And yeah, the first grade teacher gave me the little weather book. But really the first event for me was that really sucked me into it was in 1969. I was 13 years old. It was Hurricane Camille, listening to WWL on the all-night Clear Channel radio, 870 AM. And my heart was crushed when the sun came up and I couldn't hear it anymore. And that really started me on the journey. Soon after that, we had the Brent tornado of 73, the super outbreak 74, the 70s, as you know, just wall to wall. But yeah, Camille started it for me.
Yeah, I think we all have those moments. For me, It was the GES tornado in 1968 in West End in Birmingham, because I remember being at the window hearing on the radio the tornado warnings. And,
yeah, I was actually in Midfield, Alabama today, speaking to some senior adults, and
they remember that tornado. I bet
brought up that tornado. And back in the day, back in the late '60s, there was no Walmart. There was this big store called GES, and that was the Walmart of the day. And it was across from historic Rickwood Field, and tornado came through there. And I remember WVOK stayed on an emergency basis. They stayed on past their normal sign-off time. But yeah, almost everybody in that senior adult group remembered the GES tornado. So yeah, that was a big one.
Well, it's good to know that James and I guess you, Paul, even could qualify as senior adults.
What do you mean? I've been a senior adult a long time. I've got underwear older than all of you on this show.
Well, to me on the radio, when you used to hear, Lom Avenue, whenever Lom Avenue played into it, that tornado was coming to us. You're always thinking about that place that's southwest of you. Later it was, $1 Million Lakes down there, near Bessemer. Those tornadoes were coming our way in Huffman. It was like, oh no, here we go. Because those were long before radar and all the tools that we have today. But talk about your college education, Paul, and how you got, your career started. And then I want to kind of walk through some of that.
Sure. I'm a graduate of Macalester College in St. Paul, Minnesota. That did not have a formal meteorology program, but did have a strong geography program. And I was lucky in that my advisor was a climate and weather guy from way back. So I was able to take as many courses as I could there and match them up with the AMS seal and membership requirements. And I also did what turned out to be 2 years worth of internship and independent study at WCCO Television, which is the CBS affiliate here in the Twin Cities. I basically got an internship there and said, you're going to have to kick me out of here because I'm not leaving. So I did semester after semester and basically ended up staying there 2 years. And then I got my first real weather job in Chicago at a place called Murray and Treadle Weather Command. Jack Murray and Denny Treadle were two Air Force veterans from World War II. And they started an operational meteorological firm. So they had clients basically from Milwaukee all the way through Chicago into Indiana that they did work for. Cities for snow and ice removal, like almost every city and suburb in that whole area. We worked for the city of Chicago with rainfall forecasting for their flood control system. I worked for a Commonwealth Edison forecast for the Zion Nuclear Power Station, where we had to forecast wind direction in a lake breeze environment. And if you were within about 10 degrees, you got 100%. If you were within 20, I think you got 90. And if you were beyond about 20, 30 degrees, you got 0. So it was a really challenging forecast, and we were graded on that. And I lived 8 miles from the nuclear plant. It was going to be used for nuclear response in case of an accident. So my heart was into that forecast every day that I did it. They also had about 25 radio stations, including WBBM in Chicago, which is a huge AM station, and we did weather for that. So that's when I really first cut my chops in that boot camp sort of operational environment, forecasting for gas utilities and electric utilities, hourly load dispatch forecasts, and then the radio. And then my career kind of moved into broadcast meteorology. I came back to the Twin Cities, worked for WCCO TV for 6 years, went back to Chicago, worked on the WGN Morning News. I debuted that program as their first meteorologist. And then I ended up in Arizona for 9 years. Don't ask me how, it just looked like a great place to be, and discovered the North American monsoon, which is amazing, and the easterly flow there and those storms, where they get about half of their annual rainfall from that in the deserts of Arizona. And then did the homing pigeon thing, came back to Minnesota, worked for WCCO TV again for a while before this opportunity at Minnesota Public Radio came up, where I've been the first chief meteorologist for them for 15 years now. And I believe I'm still the only full-time meteorologist for a public radio group in the nation at this point.
So do you forecast for all the stations in the network, or on the station in Minneapolis? What do you do?
Yeah, we have our major flagship station called KNOW in Minneapolis, Market 15, big station. And we also have 45 smaller network stations around the upper Midwest, parts of Wisconsin, Eastern Dakotas, Northern Iowa, Upper Peninsula, Michigan. So I do the weather, the daily weather broadcasts, all the social media. I created a blog called Updraft, which is our web presence. And I also do a weekly climate show for them called Climate Cast. And we just finished 9 years with that here in January. And every week we talk about the latest climate science, news, and solutions, and have interviewed everybody from, Michael Mann, Ben Santer, Catherine Hayhoe, to former Vice President Al Gore, and corporate, leaders who are really getting that climate change is something that's affecting their supply chains and bottom lines. So it's a pretty busy little gig that I have these days.
I was going to
go through a typical day in your life, Paul. I like to do day in the life. So we've talked with Jen about radio and what she does. Radio doesn't stop. So I mean, run through a 24-hour day for you.
Yeah, so for most of the time that I've been with NPR, I've covered both morning drive and afternoon drive. So I would have kind of what I call a double split shift, where I'd be up in the morning doing the morning broadcasts, 7 a.m., 8 a.m. hour, doing a weather blog, then writing Updraft, posting whatever the weather of the day might be in the morning. And then I'd usually catch a break in the middle of the day. And then I'm back in the mill again, afternoon into late afternoon and afternoon drive, again, doing weather chats, writing an Updraft blog. In between doing producing for the Climate Cast show, interviews with climate scientists, doing their social media presence whenever that happens. And then, of course, as you know, James, the model runs, which basically come out 4 times a day. So I'm back at 9, 10 o'clock at night watching the 0Z model runs come in so that I can do some prep work for the next morning. So it's a job that never stops. As you know, weather never stops. And it's something I've just tried to keep moving forward as you go through the day part.
Sleep is hard to come by in this business.
Amen.
Yeah.
Well, Jen, I know you've got radio questions since you're talking to someone of your same ilk here.
I do. I love it.
So ask away.
Great. Yep. So, Paul, I'm a radio broadcast meteorologist. I worked at the Weather Channel for 15 years, and mostly in radio. Now I work for the Storm Report radio network. And I have different markets across the country that I cover. First of all, you have a fabulous radio voice. You just have that great, smooth sound. I also have, my first thing is I'm going to be trying to get you an email, because I'd like to talk to you about that tornado event from 1965, because I have a side company called Tornado Talk, and we write tornado history summaries. I would love to get your story. So that I wanted to get that off my plate first, but we've talked about on the show before about radio and still the importance of radio. What are your feelings? Because, radio is one of the oldest mediums, obviously, but everybody still has it in their car. But what is your experience with how radio is still such an important part of the everyday life of communities and making that community connection, and the importance of weather on radio?
Well, Jen, thank you. And it's a pleasure to talk with you and a fellow radio broadcast meteorologist. I know the Weather Channel has done great work with radio stations all around the country. I think it's fascinating to watch the history of radio because remember, TV was going to kill radio, and then the internet was going to kill radio. But what's happened is really quite contrary. The ratings for radio has in some ways never been higher. I think they've done Nielsen surveys where it's 92% of adults 12 plus or people 12 plus still listen to radio every week. And I worked in the TV business for 20 years and we would get the ratings every day for how many people are watching. And back in the day, we used to do, consistently 10, 11, 12 shares on television. Then it became, sort of 7, 8, 9 shares. And nowadays, with the fracturing of the media landscape, a lot of TV stations, successful ones, are doing, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 shares instead of what used to be a double-digit share. So that has fractured a lot. Radio is still doing extremely well in terms of listenership. We're fortunate that we're, in the last couple of years, the top not only news station in Minnesota in our market, but we've been the top radio station for many, many ratings periods over the last couple of years. That's pretty unusual because usually it's a music station that holds those top few spots. So radio is still really powerful and really effective in terms of its audience reach. And that really hasn't changed in the last 20 or 30 years.
I had the opportunity, and I currently do, to do some public radio stations. I have 2 in Louisiana, so I was able to do some tropical coverage there on for Baton Rouge and New Orleans during the Ida event. Mm-hmm. I noticed that public radio, they have a wide reach, and folks, they go to it to listen to for severe weather coverage, whether it's for the tropics or for blizzards or whatever. What is your coverage for severe weather? Do you do a lot of live work? Do you do extra work for that? And then kind of talk about, there was an event back in mid-December with the severe weather that went up, I think it was December 15th-ish, that all that was racing up, unprecedented severe weather. So talk about that a little bit too.
Yeah, first of all, that event, I worked that event. It was remarkable. I mean, we saw it coming the day before, and we knew there was a risk for severe weather. But if I would have gone on the air and said, hey, we could have, I said, we might have a tornado, thought we could have a spin up, but if we were going to have 20 plus tornadoes, I don't think I would have believed that, or anybody would have believed that. It turned out to be a completely unprecedented event with the tornadoes in Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin. And I think from the Storm Prediction Center that precedence of 75 mile an hour plus wind gusts across the upper Midwest, the most in any month since 2004. So that's just an amazing event. That's off the charts to get that kind of an event that late in the season in December in the Northern Plains. And as far as severe weather coverage for us, what we do is we're kind of an accordion. We ramp up when the weather becomes severe. If there are severe weather, thunderstorm, tornado watches and warnings in our area, we're on the air frequently. If there are tornadoes on the ground, we pretty much go into continuous coverage between myself and the show host. And potentially then if it gets serious, reporters would be brought in as well if there's any damage in the area. And we do more coverage for winter storms because they impact a much larger region than your classic severe weather or tornado outbreak and many more of our viewers. So we're pretty aggressive about extra updates on the air when we have winter storms as well that are life-threatening and can be up here in this part of the country. And just one last thing about public radio that's interesting is it's kind of branded. It's like, oh, it's sort of a liberal news, network thing. That couldn't be farther from the truth because our audience, the demographics that they've done, really skews across all political boundaries, income boundaries. Just an aside, I coached baseball for many years, my son's team, and one of the fathers of the players on the team owned a Lexus dealership in this area. And he said, Paul, you know what? We keep track of every radio station that's on when they bring the cars into service because they want to know who their market is. He says, guess who the #1 radio station is? In the Lexus dealership, it's Minnesota Public Radio. So public radio really reaches a lot of information consumers if you're curious, no matter what your political, perhaps, or economic leanings are.
So, Paul, do y'all carry the national programs like All Things Considered and Morning Edition and those things that we're used to? Do you preempt those if you have severe weather in your market?
We do preempt everything if we have severe weather in our marketing. Yes, we do carry those programs. So we're a blend of those national programs and our local programming. And because we're a pretty big market, we have a fairly big local footprint. We have, our local hosts for morning edition and All Things Considered in the afternoon. We have 2 hours of locally generated programming during the day. So, and we have newscasters that cover local from, early morning until late at night. So we have a pretty strong local presence compared to many public radio stations in medium or smaller markets.
Well, of course, the Minnesota Public Radio was famous for Prairie Home Companion and Garrison Keillor for all those years.
Yes.
Many of us enjoyed 6 p.m. on Saturday evenings listening to that show across the country. Well, I'm going to pause for just a second. Welcome Dr. Steve Businger, who's joined us. It's 13 below tonight in Minnesota. Steve, how cold is it in Hawaii today?
Today, it's a little chilly. We had a cold front come through. I think the high today might be it might be 80 degrees.
Oh.
But that's cold for us.
We'll trade you all of our temperatures combined, and we might have a hard time making it to 80 tonight. So we're glad you're here. You're, of course, professor of meteorology at the University of Hawaii. And you are, I'm going to title you the king of rainbows tonight, but we're going to talk about rainbows in a minute. But we're visiting with our friend Paul Hutner here, who joined us too from Minnesota Public Radio. So I'll turn tables on you. Be glad to ask Paul any questions here that you might have. And then we're going to get around and put you in the hot seat here very shortly. So thank you for joining us.
Well, I love National Public Radio, and I listen to Hawaii Public Radio very, very religiously. So I'm a big fan, and I'm not surprised about the demographics. That's very interesting, but strikes me as
That's good
true.
to know. It is. And I thought that our identifiers in Alabama for our public television network were cute. They're WBIQ, WEIQ, all these, but I think KNOW has them all beat, Paul.
Yeah, that's a fortunate set of call letters that they chose now 55 years ago, our 55th anniversary this year.
That's amazing. Well, I know Dr. Coco McLean has some questions she'd like to ask you, so I'll toss to Kim for a minute.
Sure, thanks, Bill. I couldn't help but notice when I was listening to you talk about all the things that you do, and the timing of when you started the climate reporting. That was around 2013, I guess. Around that time, serendipitously, the wonderful, delightful human being that's Ed Maibach at the George Mason Center for Climate Change Communication was starting to brew an idea for a program called Climate Matters, which would try to connect broadcasters from around the country who might be interested in doing climate reporting and feed them the materials needed to do local reporting that mattered about climate science, because he recognized the incredibly powerful, trusted role that broadcasters, and that includes television and radio, had. And I'm curious to know if your program had inspired him. Just the timing is so serendipitous, and you nodded. So I'm wondering if you've related to that program. Just very curious to learn a little bit more of your thoughts on if that had been a relationship, and what you've seen from your perspective, from you creating something sort of on your own to know a country that's trying to do more of this reporting.
Yeah, Ed is doing terrific work with Climate Matters, and we did generate independently, but I've interviewed Ed several times on ClimateCast, and we follow, of course, the work that he's doing with Yale and the climate opinion surveys, which are just tremendous and interesting to see how much they've shifted over the last decade or so. Climate opinion has actually moved forward quite a bit in the United States. So it's a separate entity completely. You're right, the timing is similar, but they're doing fantastic work there. And that's a good reminder that I should get Ed on again. He's a great interview.
Yeah, I mean, it just, when the program was starting, I mean, I'm a real optimist about most things. And I looked at that and I thought, oh, this could really go either way. I mean, I didn't know how warm the reception might be in markets across the country, but I was really excited for the experiment. And, what was your experience when you launched that set of stories? You said that you have a very wide-ranging audience, and I imagine you've probably heard some interesting feedback from different corners of it.
Yeah, that's a great question, Kimberly. I'll tell you what, a lot has changed in the last 9 years since we started this. I felt like when we started ClimateCast, and I've always said this from the beginning, it's climate science, it's news, and it's solutions. I feel like we were really focused a lot more on climate science in the beginning, from the standpoint of really looking at the tremendous amount and quality of science that's coming out almost every week, and relating that to our audience and sort of educating our audience about climate change. And at that point, it seemed like there was still a lot of convincing going on for a big segment of the population. Yale and Ed's group have broken it up into the 6 Americas on climate change, from doubtful and dismissive all the way to alarmed. And that alarmed and concerned segment has grown dramatically in that last 9 years. So we've really shifted from talking about, here's why you should believe that climate change is happening, to, okay, it's happening. What are the effects? What are the atmospheric effects? What are the economic effects? And then to what are the solutions? And I mean, we talk as much to, corporate sustainability directors, executives, again, who are like Cargill or General Mills, a big, huge food company, who's saying, you don't have to convince me about climate change. We see it in our supply chain. We can't grow cocoa in certain regions of the world anymore. Companies like Cargill, who is a huge food company, saying this is affecting our cattle operations in West Texas. So these effects playing out to insurance companies. I last week interviewed Ernst Rauch, who was with Munich Reinsurance, who talked about the 2021 $1 billion, climate disasters and weather disasters and catastrophic losses, and the effect that the reverberations that's having in the insurance industry and our economy. So this is a multifaceted development, and our audience eats it up. I mean, they are curious, they are concerned, they want to know what they can do about it, and we try to do a little bit of all of that.
That's great to hear more about. Thank you, Bill. I'll pass the gavel back on to you. I just wanted to learn a little bit more, because I imagined that to be a really interesting experience, in part because this has been a really pivotal 10 years. And you're right, there's been a real shift in public opinion. So you have a very interesting perspective on that from your position. Thank you for sharing it.
Thank you.
Bill.
Don't do that at least once. It's not a Zoom call.
Have to pull out the 2020. You're on mute.
I saw someone with a t-shirt that had that on it today. I'm like, yeah, that's it. That's exactly right. So I've always thought, Paul, that Weather Command was the greatest name in weather. And I think, did WBBM say that in the WeatherCast on the air there? Did they say they were the Weather Command?
Yes, we were WBBM Weather Command, and they would go to whatever the meteorologist was. I still have some old cassette tapes of me doing that. Man. And it was such a good brand, Bill, that what was called Murray and Treadle as a company, they changed their name to Weather Command. Yeah, they sound like they could be a commodities firm or something, or a Wall Street trading firm. But yeah, Weather Command certainly gets your attention. So don't you love that name, James? Weather Command.
Weather Command. Yeah.
Yes.
I like
command the weather. I remember we got complaints when we changed our name from the Weather Company to the Weather Factory, because people said you don't make the weather. So we can't even predict it, much less make it. So but I've always thought that was a great name. So you got to spend some time around the great Tom Skilling, I guess, at WGN.
I did. I worked there a little over 2 years. So when they started the WGN Morning News, I was the first meteorologist there. And I got to work with Tom back in the day when, anybody remember Difax, right? The old Difax models that used to come off the machine. And we would sit there and analyze thickness values on the European model and try to get that done. And Tom Tom is an awesome human being and an awesome meteorologist, as everybody knows, you know, and really intense in a good way behind the scenes. That when you're getting ready to do a TV weathercast, as people know, you're getting all your ducks in a row, you're getting your computer graphics lined up, and you're just trying to get everything set right before deadline. He would push. We had a Triton i7 back then. He would push that machine to like 30 or 40 graphics in his show, right up to airtime, and waiting for it to load. And he'd be in the weather office going, come on, machine, while they're grabbing at him and trying to pull him out to the set, hoping that his graphics would load right before he could get out there. So he is a completely passionate meteorologist. And, you know, I learned a lot from that guy, and I'm very grateful that I was able to work with him.
Well, we've had him on this show twice, and both shows are treasures.
Oh, yes.
You know, he really, both times, he made us feel like we were top of the world and the most important piece of journalism going on around the globe, you know, and just to hear his stories was just amazing, for sure.
He's a gift to our profession and our world.
That's for sure. So you do weather chats. Talk about what that means.
Yeah, so in the show's morning edition and All Things Considered, there are little blocks of time that they slot out for weather. They're usually about 2 minutes, give or take. But that's where I will sit down with the host, and I'll send either Kathy Werzer in the morning or Tom Cran, our afternoon host, 2 or 3 topics about the day. And obviously some of those are nuts and bolts weather topics. You know, what's the forecast going to be? But like today, for example, we'll pick a more sciencey topic, or something that's a little more depth behind the weather. And we talked about how this is a classic La Nina winter for Minnesota. It's shaping up to be that way, where we get about a 70 to 80% correlation for colder and snowier than average winters here in Minnesota in La Nina years. This started off a little mild, which is also typical, but now we're in that colder and snowier pattern, and it looks like this is a pretty typical winter. So we take an opportunity to explain a little bit more about the weather for our audience, and that's what public radio does well. And honestly, that's what I love doing in 20 years of television that they never seem to give me enough time for. So I think I found a home here in a way.
Well, that sounds awesome. And we just did a Christmas Eve special show here with an author from Nashville who had written a story about radio's role in her childhood, you know, and it came to, you know, it came to this blizzard came, and this Iowa, you know, community that was, you know, bonded together by the radio station. And it was truly, you know, a heartwarming and wonderful story. And, you know, it talked about that. So, all right, let's see. So I got to make sure Dr. Neil, we don't want to miss him here. Dr. Neil Jacobs, anything that you want to ask Paul, because I know you passed a note occasionally to your host there somewhere in Minnesota about a rainbow, probably not as many times as Dr. Businger does out in Hawaii. But Dr. Neil, make sure you don't have any questions. And Dr. Businger, we want to make sure you don't have any questions for Paul before we turn tables on you and talk to you about rainbows.
Yeah, maybe not a question, but I'm interested and excited to learn more about what do you think your audience really connects with when you're talking about these billion-dollar disasters that we put out? Because I think a lot of people, if they're not impacted directly by the storm, it's kind of hard for them to relate to the impacts. But at least when you put it in terms of financial impacts, I think people who aren't there and don't experience it or see it firsthand, at least maybe that's something they can relate to. And I guess maybe a follow-up thought is, do we need to go beyond just these high dollar incidents and just look at the day in and day out financial fluctuations? I know that there's, at least in my experience in the community, there's a lot of folks that will tend to respond that we need action if they see a major impact event. But if you just look at the everyday weather fluctuations and how much financial impact that has, it's huge.
Yeah, great point, Dr. Jacobs. And here's what I try to do. And I think this is our job as science communicators and weather communicators. The first question is, why does this matter to me? Why should I care? And I think with climate change, with weather, that's a fairly straightforward answer. With climate change, that's a much more difficult and nuanced answer. And that's why I take a lot of looks at things like billion-dollar weather disasters and storms, and how we're all essentially in the same sort of insurance pool when it comes to these disasters, because anything that happens catastrophically when it comes to infrastructure, I'll give you an example, the Duluth Flood in 2012 that cost $100 million worth of infrastructure damage, and they had to rebuild the sewers to a much greater capacity because we're getting more extreme rainfall, heavy rainfall events in Minnesota. And I know this is happening just about everywhere. That's how we're all paying more for climate change now. The insurance rates that are going up in places. Homeowners insurance in Minnesota has tripled in the last 15 years in Minnesota. Minnesota has been one of the top 3 cat losses states, I think, for 3 of the last 5 or 8 years. I'd have to go back and look at the numbers. But because we're getting these disasters that are causing more extreme damage, we're all paying more for that. And so that's one way I think you can tell people why climate change should matter to them, and because it's costing them personally. I did not come up with this, but I use it and I love it. When it comes to infrastructure, we're living in an 18th and 19th century infrastructure with a 21st century climate. It's completely different now, and it's overwhelmed in so many ways. So I think the more ways we can draw those links and those ties and make it easily understandable for people, that's what our job is as communicators. So I try to do that. I don't always succeed, but people listen, I think, when you talk about things that way and how it impacts their lives versus, trying to be more of a, I hate to say it because I'm one, a sciencey approach, or, a more of a political type approach.
Yeah, I feel like in some cases it's hard to connect with people who don't want to listen if you come at it from just one particular direction. And as a scientist myself, I hear a lot of people say, oh, I'm not going to worry about this, and private enterprise and free markets they'll figure it out once they worry about it. But I think what a lot of people don't realize is the reinsurance industries, the logistics companies, they've been thinking about this for a long time. And they're actually way ahead of the curve in some cases, and a lot of the science community would probably even give them credit for.
Absolutely. And to my surprise, corporations have been the same way. Most of the Fortune 500 companies, they're already seeing impacts from climate change. Best Buy, big retailer, lost a hard drive plant in Malaysia several years ago to catastrophic flooding. They saved $50 million a year just through, making their lighting in their stores more efficient globally. Target, the biggest, I believe, roof solar retail operations in the world. So these companies get it. They're seeing it. They're seeing the savings. They're seeing how they can be sustainable and how they have to be. And I think that opens more eyes in the long run than me saying, hey, the Arctic got, considerably warmer than the middle of the planet. Or as we say in Minnesota, we've warmed about 5 degrees and we're about 5 inches wetter in the last century, roughly. So yeah, it's a dance. It's a tough one. And I'm an optimist by nature, but I'm a realist also when it comes to climate change and the enormity of the problem and the enormity of the communications challenge that we have. And I have both kinds of days, right? I mean, I'm human. There are days when I think I'm doing some good work, and there are days when I think, am I really making a connection here? So I guess you just do the work and do it to the best of your ability.
So James, I know we'll have Paul for a while tonight, but you always like to ask really good questions. Is there anything that's burning on your mind right now before I ask Dr. Businger?
On a personal note, did you know a guy named Steve Sanders that worked at Channel 9 in Chicago?
I remember Steve, but I'm not sure if I worked there the same years that he did.
Okay, he's just an old friend and that worked there with Denise Cannon, and he was a journalist and did news. But I've always been impressed by the operation up there. They have all, of course, with Tom doing the weather, and I think the journalism side, their 9 o'clock news was so good. And again, lately, I've not been able to watch them, but that to me, that's a very impressive operation. And I think that's great that you got a chance to loop through there. In fact, I see a CBM back there on your wall. Is that what that is?
It is. Yes. I was fortunate enough to get that after I got my seal when that program came on board.
And so in terms of weather communication, do you find it easier on radio or television? You've had a chance to do both for a long time.
That's a great question. And I love that question, James. I love TV because of the ability for us to use pictures to tell the story. But here's the cool thing about radio. Now I have to build those pictures in people's minds with the words that I use. And that's a challenge. But I love it. And it seems like I'm doing okay at that because the people I talk to who listen to me will bring things back or mention them to me that stuck with them. So I like it. It's a different challenge for sure.
And I grew up in a radio station as a child playing these songs. And to me, the fun part about that, you're creating this mental picture for the listeners. And to me, you are the graphic system. Your verbal communication ability is a Barron system, a WSI system to generate graphics in people's minds. And I think that is too stinking cool.
Yeah. And it's fun. I won't deny it. I never thought I'd end up in public radio, being a TV meteorologist for 20 years, but I have to say, this is a great fit for me. I love the work, and I love our audience is weather obsessed and weather curious, and that's a great place to be.
And one more thing, one of the struggles I think we all have, whether it's radio or television, it's time. Where in a traditional newscast, they'll give you, 2.5, 3 minutes. Good goodness, I got 10 minutes worth of material. Do you have an adequate amount of time on radio to tell the weather story daily?
Honestly, not most days, because 2 minutes is great. I mean, if you're going to get to the nuts and bolts of a forecast, that's an easy minute, maybe more. And then if you really want to get into anything about the science of meteorology, as you know, James, that takes time. So right. I wish I had more time. I have added a segment on our midday show where I now get about 5 minutes once a week. And that's a great amount of time because you can really dig into a few different topics. So I think it's kind of once you get to 3 minutes, you're really getting somewhere.
So Paul, do you do recorded, customized forecasts for the other stations on the network? Or is it sort of a blanket approach you take?
Yeah, we're pretty much everything's live. We feed all of the network stations the same signal at once.
So Jen, you'd love to have that 5 minutes, wouldn't you?
Oh my goodness. I have typically 20 to 30 seconds just to get out those quick forecasts. If I had 5 minutes, I wouldn't know what to do with myself. The longest forecast I have is a minute and a half. We have one station in Pine Bluff, Arkansas that gives us a minute and a half to do a longer forecast. And so in a discussion, I get to be a little bit more geeky during that time. So to have 5 minutes, that's really cool.
There's a side discussion going on back here about DIFACs. Paul, you raised a sore point, and the generation gap is becoming apparent. And I hear Kim Cloco McLean has lots of stories about DIFACs that she'll share with us.
I like how those things smell. I like the smell of DIFACs as it comes out of the machine.
I love the paper DIFACs in the morning.
You can go back and find some of those charts still on the internet. That's kind of fun to find. Dr. Businger, you've been listening with great interest out there to Paul and his story and his amazing career. Anything you want to ask him before we start talking to you about rainbows?
Well, I just want to say that the work you're doing, Paul, with regard to educating about climate change is incredibly important, and I'm very grateful to you. I try to do some of the same. I wish that our local stations paid a little bit more attention to climate change matters, but I can sort of understand. It's like watching grass grow. It's not as sexy as the incoming hurricane or whatever it might be. But on a related note, in Hawaii, when Aniki struck, it was right on the heels of Andrew hitting Florida, and it was a wake-up call to the insurance industry. In fact, the insurance industry pulled out of Hawaii for insuring mortgages. And as a result, you couldn't buy or sell a house in Hawaii for a while. So the fact that climate change and the link to climate change, of course, is the observation that hurricanes are tracking a little bit further away from the equator with time. And so Hawaii is becoming more and more like right in the zone for being struck by hurricanes. Stay tuned. I'm concerned. But I don't have a question per se, but I've enjoyed listening to the conversation, and I admire your smarts and how to communicate it to people who have a business sense, and that's so important. So,
it's been a blast hearing about your career and the work you do. Paul, now we're going to turn the table, so you have to ask questions too now, Dr. Businger. So bring some good ones. Talk about the culture of rainbows in Hawaii, Dr. Businger. It's a part of life there.
It's so amazing how many rainbows there are in Hawaii, and as a result, it does infuse the culture on many different levels. There is the Hawaiian cultural level, where the Hawaiians believe that the rainbow was the way in which their ancestors would go to the heaven, and also the path for the gods to come down and commune with the Hawaiians was via the rainbow. And then, of course, just daily culture in Hawaii. You see rainbows on the sides of buildings. You see rainbows on our license plates. There are so many businesses have rainbow as part of their name. And then our sports teams are called the Rainbow Warriors. So, it permeates everything here.
So talk about the science of rainbows for a minute. Go back into, how and why they're formed and some misconceptions or things we need to know.
Well, I think the very fundamentals are that it is a combination of refraction and reflection of light that produces a rainbow. And you have to be facing away from the sun in order to see the rainbow. And then it's going to be 42 degrees above the shadow of your head. As the sun is shining past you, you cast a shadow and you go up 42.5 degrees, and that's where the rainbow will be in a circle. If the sun is too high in the sky, then that circle will have lowered to the horizon. So in Hawaii, morning and afternoon are great for rainbows, and in the winter, it's better for rainbows than during the summer because the angle of the sun is lower, and you can see rainbows all day long in the wintertime. Plus, it rains a little bit more in the winter. So, but summer we have trade wind showers, and we get a lot of rainbows then too.
Yeah, I know that the double rainbow was a meme around the internet before really memes were even popular. You didn't do that meme, did you, Dr. Businger?
I didn't. No. And even though some people call me the Rainbow Man, if you look up Rainbow Man on YouTube, you'll come up with a wonderful, wonderful video of a guy who is just so enthusiastic about a double rainbow. It seems like he's about to leave the planet.
I think a lot of folks have run into that. We've had a lot of folks comment this week when they knew you were going to be on the show. Do you have rainbow chaser convergence in Hawaii? We talk about storm chaser convergence in the plains, but I hear some people actually have that as a hobby, huh?
Chasing rainbows is definitely a hobby in Hawaii, and so if you have a smartphone, you can load the Rainbow Chase app and make an effort to try to be in the right place for a rainbow. What's funny is that two people standing next to each other are seeing a rainbow that's being created by a different set of rain droplets. So you could say that you're seeing your own unique rainbow. Everyone sees their own unique rainbow, even if you're standing right next to your spouse and you're both commenting on how beautiful it is. You're actually seeing a different rainbow than she is.
That's funny. Talk about that double rainbow for a minute. Are all rainbows double rainbows? But what makes some of them evident to us sometimes and not others?
Well, the double rainbow requires two reflections on the back of the drop, and the optics are such, the geometry is such that the double rainbow ends up a little bit higher. It's 51 degrees as opposed to 42 degrees, so it's 8 degrees different. And the fact of the matter is, because you have two reflections at the back of the drop, you are leaking some light out of the drop, and it's not coming back to the viewer. And so the double rainbow tends to be less bright than the primary rainbow, the first rainbow. And that's why sometimes you see it and sometimes you don't. It really depends on the quality of the light and whether or not the raindrops are in the right place and everything to make it happen. Clear skies really help. If you have pollution in the air, then the double rainbow tends to go away. So there's various issues.
So talk about the things you look at to think about, what's going to give you a good rainbow day. And some of that may lead into some folklore that's useful in forecasting the weather. And is it different in Hawaii than in other parts of the world?
Oh, great question. Yeah, so there are some folklore things, like red sky at night, sailor's delight. And it's sort of similar, or red sky in the morning, sailors take warning. So if you have a red sky in the morning, that means that there is a system moving in from the west, and it'll probably start to rain. And if you're lucky, if it rains soon enough, you'll get rainbows. Now, the curious thing about Hawaii is that we get our weather from the east. So it's kind of like going to London and looking at the traffic in the wrong direction and getting hit, they drive on the wrong side of the road. Well, our weather, it comes in from the wrong side. It comes in from the east, and it really messes up the forecasters. But it also means that the red sky in the morning, sailors take warning, doesn't work here. It's the opposite.
So how did you accommodate that in folklore? How did they come up with that rhyme?
Well, I guess they came up with that probably in England, where the weather's coming from the west.
So how did they accommodate it in Hawaii?
Well, I think in Hawaii we have other things, sort of like if you're unhappy with the fact that it's raining, just wait a minute and it'll quit. So, which of course that is also valid other places, but we have so many small showers, and those are perfect for rainbows, right? You need to get the light in underneath the shower. And in Hawaii, we get these small convective showers. We have very clean marine air, so the small clouds actually cause precipitation, whereas on the mainland, they won't. They won't rain on the mainland because there will be too many condensation nuclei, too many droplets that the cloud has in it, and as a result, you don't get efficient coalescence of the droplets to form rain. And you need to have the Bergeron ice process. Getting geeky here, but you need to have ice in a cloud on the mainland. So that's why thunderstorms are so good for producing rain in the high plains. In Hawaii, you don't need a thunderstorm. Any small rain cloud, it'll rain. And the funny thing is, you look up, and it'll be blue sky, it'll be raining, and there'll be a sun, and it'll be a rainbow. So it's a lot of fun in that regard, being out here in the tropics.
So I know some of the other panelists are going to chime in and ask some questions here, but I'll diverge for just a minute to talk about your long and storied career. Talk about how you got started. We kind of shared a little bit early on in the show tonight about how, those epiphany moments were for us that led us into this field. What was it for you, and how did your career evolve?
Well, as a kid, I grew up in Seattle, and if I looked at my curtain in the morning. And if it was brightly lit, then I knew there was snow on the ground, because Seattle's very dark and gray and rainy and crappy, and it snows rarely. And so, but the thing is, when it snows in my neighborhood as a kid, a bus couldn't make it up the hill. And so it was a holiday. So that really got me kind of excited about the weather. It's like, oh, maybe if we forecast this, then I'd know when I could have a holiday. And of course, the forecast of snow in Seattle is still quite an art. They have a very hard time trying to get that right, because you got all these mountains around. You got the warm ocean. And the cold air's got to get through somehow through the Fraser River. But snow was one of the things. I became a fanatic skier as a kid, and so that kind of triggered my weather interest. But in all fairness, I should probably divulge the fact that my father is a PhD meteorologist who taught at the University of Washington. He was a professor there, and specialized in turbulence. And I used to help blow on his instruments to get them calibrated in the right direction. That was so. But I think that despite the fact that my father was a meteorologist, the weather itself just interested me as a kid.
It's very fascinating. So talk for a moment about the program at the University of Hawaii, because we don't think about that very often as one of the great meteorology schools, and it's got to be an incredible place to come to school. So talk about the program for a minute.
Yeah, I'm proud to say that our program was rated 15th in the world last year in an evaluation based on research and publications and so forth. So we have some really dynamite researchers that are part of our department that put out a lot of papers. And we specialize in tropical meteorology and tropical climate and climate change. And we also have an undergraduate degree and a master's and a PhD degree. And then we have this 5-year program where you go through your 4 years of undergraduate. You only need to do 1 year more to get a master's that allows you to have a leg up to become a forecaster in the National Weather Service. So it's a great program. It's very highly rated, and we're part of a larger school of ocean, earth, and atmospheric sciences, and geology, geophysics, and all that. It's a real powerhouse. We have maybe 125 million a year in research grants and lots of opportunities. Plus, we have about 1,000 people that work in the school. So there's just about every type of specialty you can think of in earth and environmental science. We have it.
That is outstanding. So I came across your paper and highlighted in BAMS a couple of editions back. Talk about that paper and some other things that are in that in that research paper that would be interesting to our audience.
Yeah, well, the idea for the paper was kind of in my head, and then COVID struck, and I had some time on my hands, and I thought, what could I write that would be fun and uplifting and take people away from this pandemic? And so I worked on this paper, and it covers why it is that Hawaii is such a special place for rainbows in terms, of the meteorology. We have mountains, as you can see in the background there, and the mountains lift the air and cause showers to develop over the terrain. And then on the lee side, you have sinking motion, and that opens up the sky for the sun, which is where Honolulu is. And by the way, for students, Hawaii is a wonderful place to live. It's safe. There's a lot to do. You can learn how to surf. You can go hiking. There's a lot of activities, and the city of Honolulu is a fun city. We have symphonies and theater, and it's hard to believe, really, being way out here in the middle of the Pacific, that there's so much going on. But back to the paper, focus of the paper is two parts. One is the physics of the rainbow and how people thought about it back in the day. You know, the Aristotle and Leonardo da Vinci and so forth. And then it talks more about why it is that Hawaii is so special in terms of finding rainbows and having so many rainbows. And then finally, I have a friend who's a partner in developing this rainbow app called Rainbow Chase. And the Rainbow Chase app is going nationally. So far, we've got the entire West Coast, and that we expect to have the rest of the country in the next month or two. And you can download it for free, and it gives you guidance on where to look for rainbows. And it's also a weather app, so it's kind of fun. It shows radar data and satellite data, and it gives you the forecast in text kind of fashion. So it's a pretty well-rounded weather app, but there's no other weather app that'll tell you where to go look for a rainbow. So
that is really exciting. I know I've enjoyed the Penn State app that tells you about the great sunrises and sunsets, and I think this one will be right there with it. I can't wait till it comes to Alabama. For sure. Dr. Neil Jacobs, I know that Dr. Businger had your attention at surfing there for a minute.
Yeah, that Hawaii was actually my very last trip before the pandemic. I was there in March when a couple of first cases showed up in some hotels over there, and I remember that was kind of the genesis of the panic. But yeah, I keep a couple of boards stashed at a friend's house in Pupukea, and I try to get out there.
Wow.
As much as I can. I have a lot more time now than I used to, but a couple of quick questions on maybe some of the physics of the rainbows. So when you're looking at a double rainbow, the ones in particular, I guess maybe the one behind you,
right?
The colors on the opposing rainbows are inverted. Is that always the case?
Yes, it's always the case, and it's because you have one reflection in the primary bow at the back of the drop, and then for the secondary bow, you have two reflections at the back. So it inverts the colors.
So I would encourage the listeners to go check out some images on the internet, because you can tell which ones are photoshopped, because the people photoshopping don't actually invert the colors properly. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't like unaware of some physics phenomenon that produced a refraction the other direction. Why is it dark in between them?
Oh, excellent question. It turns out that there is quite a lot of dispersion of the light within the primary bow. So in this part of the rainbow here, that there's a lot of dispersion, there's a lot of light leaking out. And then right at the rainbow edge, it all of a sudden becomes not possible for light to leak out of the droplet. So any light that's over here might be coming from haze droplets or a little bit of salt aerosols in the sky or something. And then similarly for the double rainbow, light is leaked out here, but not inside. And so between the two, you end up with this dark area called Alexander's dark band.
One of the things that I always found interesting in Hawaii, because you always think of it as this very lush island, is that on the dry side, it's actually really dry. I was surprised, particularly on Maui, on the west side, how dry it was. How is that? I mean, I guess maybe from a numerical weather prediction standpoint, is that something that the models can resolve, or is that sub-grid scale, like upslope phenomena? Like, how does that work?
That's a complicated question, but let me try to make it simple. If you have a global model, the resolution of the model in the past was not good enough to include the terrain of the Hawaiian Islands. And so you wouldn't see that difference between the upwind side and the downslope side. but for if you have a regional model, one that has lots of resolution, and you have the islands properly in the model, then that difference between the windward and the lee side of the island will show up in the model forecast. Yeah, so it's a resolution issue.
So speaking of chasing rainbows, and I guess maybe this is fascinating to me because when people chase tornadoes, they try to get as close as they can to get a picture with it. Do you have any chasers that chase rainbows where they actually think that they can find the end of it, or are they just trying to figure out how to get the photo of it?
Yeah,
are they
if
miserable that they're unsuccessful?
I would love to be able to sell the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow to these guys that are out there looking for the gold. It turns out that the rainbow always is set by the geometry, and so it's the relationship of the sun and your eyes and the location of the raindrops in the sky that fixes the rainbow's location, and it's always going to be 42 degrees above the shadow of your head. So if you move, the shadow of your head moves and the rainbow moves. It stays fixed. And you can have a shower come by with lots of wind and everything, but the rainbow that is being created, even in that condition, is absolutely fixed. It doesn't shake or move around with the wind. It is fixed by the geometry. So no, you can't find the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow.
So Dr. Businger, the one question then is that why are there so many songs about rainbows?
Well, I mean,
Kermit the Frog asked that question in a movie in 1979, and I've been searching for the answer ever since.
Well, I could give you my perspective on it. I think that rainbows are very inspiring. When you see a nice double rainbow, it can stop you in your tracks, and it can make you just all of a sudden lose your whole train of thought. Everything flies out of your head, and you're looking at this rainbow, and it's a very existential moment. It's a moment where time can stand still for a minute, and all your cares can fall away. And I can just see the lyrics of a song kind of floating out of that.
Yeah, Kermit saying, rainbows are visions, but only illusions, and rainbows have nothing to hide. And I think that's pretty cool. Talk about moonbows for a minute, Dr. Businger.
My friend Paul, who is my partner in creating this rainbow app, and I chartered a helicopter the other day, December 18th. And our goal was to fly around Hawaii on a good night with a full moon, and to capture a perfect circle moonbow. And I had a new Nikon camera on a gimbal mount, and we had the doors off of the helicopter, so the wind was whistling by. And we went out chasing, and we found a beautiful moonbow, and I got some photographs, and I have a moonbow photograph. But in the helicopter, as you know, there's a certain amount of shake, and boy, it's not a lot of light that's coming back from a moonbow, because the moon, even though the moon itself is pretty bright, it's not nearly as bright as the sun. And so, although our eyes can see the moonbow pretty well, getting it on film and having it be perfect, it's still a work in progress. I have some new technology that I'm going to apply, but I think I have to go out and get some more film. And maybe what I could do, Bill, is send you a nice circle rainbow image if you haven't already seen one. You
can screen share it if James will grant you that privilege, Dr. Businger, if you want to. If you have one that you can share.
Yeah,
James,
I can do that.
Can you pass that privilege to our guests?
Approved.
Right.
It has been stamped, sealed, and approved.
All right, so now I have to. Now I've got to go real quickly.
Choose your window that you want to share.
Right, I had to open the window first because
There
so
we go. Lots of great pictures there.
Merry
And
Christmas
be
and
descriptive
Happy
for our
New Year.
audio listeners.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
as Paul said, you have to describe.
So this is a double circle rainbow as seen from an from a helicopter in the afternoon. This was before we went out to do the moon boat chasing. And this is above the pineapple fields, just a stone's throw from Haleiwa. And let me pull up another one. This one, you can actually see the coast. The coast of the North Shore is running through this, and Pupukea is kind of just at the very top of this of the coastline in this image.
Can you expand that image and let us see it up close and personal?
Let me take a look. Oh, how about that?
We're still seeing your file structure right now. So if you can
Oh, really?
that share, yeah.
Okay.
There are lots of great pictures
okay.
you're tantalizing us with there.
I see. Right. I'm not sharing the.
Yeah, it might be that you need to open the image you want to share, and then when you select,
And then
share that.
And then share that.
Yep.
All right. Yeah, that makes total sense. So let me do that. I'm gonna open this image and
then share that
right,
afterwards.
right. So let me quit sharing this and then let me share that. Oh, I'm so sorry. I was using something called Bridge, and it pops up.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, is that better?
That's perfect.
Yeah.
So what a stunning photo of the coast. This is from a helicopter, I guess, with the primary bow. And then would you call that the secondary bow? Is that what you said?
Yeah, I call it the secondary bow or the double bow. But this beach down here is called Police Beach. And it's used a lot in various TV shows like Hawaii Five-0 or the TV show Lost. This is where the plane went down and they had pieces of the plane on the beach. It was right here.
Wow.
Police Beach.
And there's a nice wind farm in the back.
Yeah, Waimea Bay is right there. If you can see my cursor. Yeah, kind of above the middle of the top. And then Pupukea is, or Pipeline is just around the corner. It's right near the top here.
That's where your surfboards are stashed, Dr. Jacob?
I got a couple of them, and they better still be there when I get back.
This weekend we had 50-foot wave faces up on
I was watching that.
And
you better get a clean COVID test, Dr. Jacob. You can be on your way.
Yeah, if you're vaccinated, and yeah, I guess you do need to have a test. It makes it a little bit inconvenient, but it's not too bad getting in to Hawaii. It's and our case numbers are dropping, so I think things are looking up.
So back in March, you were on an Ira Flato show, Science Friday, which is of course one of our favorite shows. And I'm sure one of Paul's favorite shows too. And I'm sure that brought you a lot of notoriety.
Yeah, well, I got calls from all over the world when that article first came out, and there was a news release. And then I got calls from New Zealand and France, and there was kind of unexpected how large of an impact it had. And Science Friday has that particular show aired, I think, 3 different times here in Hawaii. I think they thought it was, it must have been popular locally. So they put it on several times, HBR.
Well, I know a lot of our panelists have got questions. Who wants to go first? Who has a question for Dr. Businger? Don't everyone jump in at once. Kim Cloco, I see you coming off mute.
I'll jump in really quickly. I guess it's sort of half question, but mostly embarrassing personal anecdote. But when you were talking about rainbow chasing, I do want to say there is a way to chase rainbow, but entirely revolves around trying to get a good vantage of the phenomenon, right? So you can know that conditions are going to probably be right to get a rainbow. So you have to just put yourself in the right spot so you can actually see the whole thing. When you live in urban environments, especially, that can be really, really tough. And when I lived in Washington, D.C. for a number of years. I lived exactly 550 steps from the Senate office buildings, I counted. And I was very, very close to the National. And whenever the conditions would be good to possibly get rainbows there, what I would do, I would essentially chase the rainbow setup by bolting over to behind the Capitol complex and looking down the green part of the National Mall, so I could see the rainbow. Depending on the angle, it could be a rainbow over all the Capitol buildings, or it could be poised over another piece of the complex. But you can rainbow chase. I just want to put that out there, that it really is. It can be a very physical thing, more than chasing tornadoes, which we do with cars. We do this with our feet. But I want to ask a bit of a question about this, because often doing my rainbow chasing, I'm also often doing sunset chasing, the kinds of conditions that produce really amazing sunsets. Also, the kinds of conditions under which you're likely to get a rainbow. And you kind of chasing sunsets and rainbows is pretty much the same. It's a very similar objective. For a good sunset, you want to get in a position where you are able to observe. There's a break in the clouds near the western horizon, so you get the light, right? And then you get all of the light to reflect under the cloud base. And that, incidentally, that light peering through then under clouds, if between you and the sun, then you'll get a rainbow on the other side of the sky. So I'm wondering if you can just comment on that really what you're looking at, if you're looking at trying to get good conditions for one of these phenomena, often you're trying to get good conditions for both of them. It's really just an awesome set of things to observe in these very special conditions. And just wondered if you could share a little bit about that, because that's sort of been my experience with.
Yeah, that's a great question, or a set of questions, really. And you're absolutely right. In order to be able to get a good vantage point for a rainbow, you need to have a good view of the sky. And in Hawaii, that's not so difficult, but still, you need to think about that. So what we originally were planning to do was identifying rainbow stops, places like parks, beaches, places where you have a good view of the sky, and then that the app would actually give you distance and time it takes to get, and would tell you where to go in kind of a nowcasting fashion. And that is a part of the app which hasn't been developed yet, but I think that it needs to be developed. And then, of course, that you need to get some local expertise for where, if you live in Denver or in DC or somewhere in the country, where to go in order to have good vantage point for rainbows. And with regard to the sunset, yes, absolutely. I think that rainbow chasers are also sunset chasers. It's the same problem with your DNA. I think that if you're interested in rainbows, you're probably going to be interested in sunsets too.
That romantic gene in there somewhere.
Yeah, right. And so, and having alto stratus with a break and at the sunset side is perfect. And why not have the app do that too? And I've actually thought about including a rainbow chasing portion to the app. Yeah.
Are you accessing NOAA data to do the weather forecasting side of the app, and comment on the ease or difficulty of accessing that data, Dr. Bruce?
Well, NOAA makes it pretty easy to access the radar data, but you have to have pretty big servers that are taking all the data and parsing it and making it ready, and then you're using some kind of a Google Maps thing in the phone, and you have to overlay this stuff. There's a lot going on there, and it's non-trivial. And we have a company that's based in Hawaii that's helping with the development of the app. Yeah.
So James Spann, I know you wondered there for a second. I was going to ask you if you've ever played any songs by Alexander's Dark Band, but I guess I can't ask you that question anymore to trip you up, because Dr. Busiker gave away the joke there.
Yep.
Alexander's
so James,
Dark
ahead
Band.
Let's say what now?
Oh, Alexander's Dark Band. I'd never made that connection before. And I'm a musician, so I should have.
Yeah. Well, James, any questions you want to ask Dr. Busiker before we go to the recorded segments?
I was the snow on the peaks out there. I'm fascinated by that in Hawaii. And, we had a blizzard warning back in December for the peaks, and, some of these news outlets ran with it. And if Joe Q Public, they were watching this or looking at it, they think it's snowing on the beaches of Waikiki. But have you been up above 10,000 feet? Have you been in the snow on the islands there? And tell us about it. I'd love to know what it's like.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I have a research program which is funded by NSF through the astronomers. And they have me forecasting the weather for Mauna Kea. And in particular, we're looking at snow, because snow it's not good for the telescopes, right? I mean, you have to close the dome when it snows. So I know I've been up there many, many times, and even in snowy conditions. And I've photographed some fog bows up there. So rainbows where the droplets are small enough that you don't get a good dispersion of color, and you just end up with this really intense white bow. So I've seen that at the top of Mauna Kea.
Yeah, what's the lowest height where snow has been measured in Hawaii? 10,000 feet or 9,000 feet? What's the altitude?
Back in February of, I think it was 2020, it got to 6,000 feet on Haleakala on Maui.
Wow.
So 6,000 feet, that's pretty low when you think about it. But there are newspaper articles from the 1800s that talk about snow on the mountains above Honolulu, and they're 3,000 feet. So I think it's gotten lower.
Awesome. Well, thanks. What we're going to do right here is take a quick break. We've got to pause for just a second. So we're going to hear from Tony Rice and his report on astronomy. We've got Jen's This Week in Tornado History. We're going to come back with the email inbox, the picks of the week, the weather roundup, and much more as WeatherBrains rolls along.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your astronomy outlook.
Ground controllers coaxed the James Webb Space Telescope into position around L2 this afternoon. The telescope's been slowing since it was given that final push by the Ariane 5 rocket, which lifted it back on Christmas morning. When those thrusters were fired, they weren't to stop the telescope, but instead to redirect that remaining momentum into a huge circular orbit. Webb can't actually slow itself down at all, much less stop. Its thrusters are pointed back at Earth. They'll be used about 3 to 4 times each year during the mission's lifespan to keep it in the right place. You see, everything has gravitational pull. Mission planners must take this into account when designing the path that a spacecraft will follow. It's easy to think of all of this like a series of wells across the landscape of the solar system. Big things like Earth have deep wells. Really big things like the sun have really deep wells. The Webb telescope will spend its life just inside the edge of Earth's well. Those thrusters will be used to push it back up the hill as necessary, but not so much that it ends up on the other side of the hill and starts drifting away. Monday's insertion burn puts the telescope into a slow, million-plus kilometer wide, 6-month-long orbit around L2. This is a nice, stable orbit and doesn't require much fuel to maintain. That's what helps extend the life of the telescope. This orbit's also big enough that the solar panels will never be in Earth's shadow. Elsewhere in the sky, look for the moon to pass through the claws of the constellation Scorpius in pre-dawn skies later this week. To the left, you'll find Mars, and within the constellation, look for Antares, also known as the heart of the Scorpion. It's often mistaken for Mars because of its orangey color. That's your astronomy outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
This week in tornado history, January 24th, 1967. We detail in a summary at tornadotalk.com the last F4 tornado to affect St. Louis. The National Weather Service deems it as the fourth worst tornado in history to hit the St. Louis metro area. The tornado developed in the western portion of St. Louis County near the Howard Bend pumping station. Heavy damage was reported at the Chesterfield Manor nursing home, and the tornado crossed through numerous subdivisions and heavily populated communities. A total of 168 homes were destroyed and 258 sustained major damage. 600 businesses were destroyed or damaged. 216 people were injured, and sadly, there were 3 fatalities. 2 young girls, aged 6 and 4, were killed in separate homes. 73-year-old Bessie Dillman also died. She had been visiting her son when the tornado hit. Calling all weather enthusiasts, join the American Meteorological Society by becoming a member of the band at amsweatherband.org. As an AMS Weatherband member, you'll get to go behind the scenes with the scientists of the American Meteorological Society, whose members have been at the forefront of weather, water, and climate research for over 100 years. You'll learn about the very latest research from the scientists who are actually doing it. What's more, you'll become a part of a passionate online community of weather enthusiasts, get access to exclusive videos, webinars, and other fun content, and support the science you love. Learn more and join the band today at amsweatherband.org.
All right, time now to dive into the good old email inbox and see if anything happens to be in there.
Letters, we get letters. We get stacks and stacks of letters.
All righty, we're going to go back to an email from January 4th from Stephen Graham, and he had just started listening to the podcast and says he's been enjoying it very much. And he wrote a lot of stuff here. He is a second-generation airline pilot, but I wanted to read one of his first points here. The language used by meteorologists is extremely technical and often creates a large barrier to affect communication with other communities. And so he kind of went through all that a little bit, but he did want to just mention that he was listening to episode 822, and it was one example of members of the community recognizing how important it is that you don't lose your audience with unnecessarily obscure terms. Keep that up, because I think sometimes we can get into the weeds a little bit, but to try to remember who our audience is. So we really appreciate that feedback, and thanks for listening so much. And we got an email from Ken Huey. Ken is a Tornado Talk fan and is a member, and he just wrote us a little note today. He said, please let the crew know, and he wrote that to me, Jen, please let the crew know how much they are appreciated by us regular weather nerds. I've always been a news junkie. However, as I get older, with all the insanity we're seeing now, I realize that watching so much news is mentally and physically toxic, especially since I can't do anything on a day-to-day basis to really make things better in those areas. Today, I've decided to take on a mission to go back and watch all 16 years worth of WeatherBrains instead of watching an hour or two of news on a daily basis. Since I've always loved weather stuff, especially severe weather, this will entertain, educate, and mostly importantly, replace a lot of the toxic content that's not actionable and only increases stress and frustration. Again, big thanks to all the team. That was pretty neat. So hopefully we don't stress them out in the 16 years of shows. But
yeah.
Anyway, then we had Paul Kohlmeyer wrote, longtime listener, and had a guest idea, getting John D from the UP of Michigan for have we ever had him on the show?
Who's that? Say it again.
His name is John D from the UP of Michigan, and he does a site for snow lovers. So a lot of folks have been writing about all of our snow shows. So the past 2 homegrown shows, we did a lot of talks about the snow forecast and all the snow maps and all the predictions and stuff. And so we had a lot of great comments on that, and people were very interested. And so apparently he has a site for snow lovers with his snow forecast. So maybe that's something we could look into. Another comment, this was somebody who was intrigued by Troy. This is Devin Greeny. Enjoyed your snow forecast episode. I was intrigued by Troy Kimmel's point on the dearth of soundings over Austin, and seems strange that it's one of the fastest growing metros in the nation. Just to the south, there's an even larger San Antonio, along with 2 Air Force bases, and of course, Houston. And he sent us a map here of from 1985, Atmosphere in Action by Joe Engelman. Any reason the network has not been expanded? Is the scientific community expecting to move on from balloons? Any insight there?
That's a Neil Jacobs question.
I mean, that's sort of the gold standard. I wouldn't. We can add more stuff, but I don't necessarily know that they're going to go away anytime soon, because that's one way we calibrate all the other instruments. There's also a huge climatological record. If you're just talking about the radio sounds.
Okay. Here's another question from James Lewis from Michigan. My question is related to the previous discussions of Twitter and snow maps and those things. I doubt this would ever happen due to how niche the group is, but what if, in addition to the verified check mark, there was some kind of verified meteorologist mark, like an account tag that said you are really a meteorologist and not just somebody in your basement? Maybe, I don't know. I don't know if that would ever happen or not.
I think that's what the CCM and the CBM is supposed to do.
And the digital seal, the NWA.
Right. And National Weather Service, National Weather Association has their seals, and I think that kind of serves that purpose. So
okay,
you can always look for those.
Yeah, I would leave it up to those groups to authorize that. I wouldn't leave it up to social media to decide who's the expert and gets the check mark.
No. And one more email here. We got this from Larry Morrell. Hello, WeatherBrains. I've been a longtime watcher of the show on YouTube, and I love the shows and enjoy the laughs. Thanks for all you do. In regards to a few episodes back when it was talked about the future of meteorology, I've been a storm spotter for over 20 years in South Georgia, and I've recently signed up for an undergraduate certificate for forecasting to further my knowledge of weather and possibly an entry into the weather enterprise. In y'all's WeatherBrains opinions, is it a decent starting point before attempting to go get a degree? Any input, suggestions, or things y'all might add that would help? He right now works in emergency services, so he's just wondering if this is a nice little step to try to, gain a foot into the meteorology and the weather enterprise. What do you guys think? Any thoughts? I think anything will help. Any weather knowledge that you can gain will certainly help your skill set.
Yeah, I don't know enough about it, I think, to comment on it, but I agree. I mean, it's very competitive to get a good job within the weather service or, private sector. And the more you know earlier in your life, the better off you'll be. You get some kids that started learning this stuff when they're, 15 years old. So
yeah,
anything like that to jumpstart a college degree is great.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think he's just wanting to see, he already works in emergency services, so he wants to, he already contributes to service. He just wants to see if there's some ways he can enhance his skills. I think anything that you can do, whether it be getting a certificate or even just watching National Weather Service, education videos, anything that you can do to increase your knowledge. And even if you have a degree, I think it's good to stay on top of the recent trends and all that. So I think anything you can do to further yourself is a good idea. So thank you everybody for emailing us. I'm so glad that you guys have enjoyed the shows, and you can email us all your comments and suggestions at email@weatherbrains.com. And you can get all the updates on the show if you go to our website, weatherbrains.com, and then check out right on the side, you're going to see all of our cute little photos. Underneath, you can click a link and get our weekly newsletter, and you can get even more brainy stuff there on a weekly basis.
Okay, so let's do a quick weather roundup. Who's our East Coast correspondent here? I guess it's Dr. Jacobs. You got the buzz going, get the buzz. Bomb cyclone this weekend. I've been watching the models.
The models
what do you think?
They're all over the place. I like a particular GFS run from a few days ago, the one that dumps the most snow in my backyard that the model has now decided is not okay with. It's narrowing down. I mean, the weather right now is cold. It's going to get colder. And I think all the talk is what's going to happen with this East Coast extratropical cyclone. It looks right now that there's going to be a storm somewhere forming southeast of Hatteras. Whether or not it hugs the coast or hugs the western edge of the Gulf Stream is probably to be determined. But if it hugs the coast, the cold air will be there. So if it takes a western track, there's going to be one heck of a snowstorm. If it takes an eastern track, it'll be a total dud.
I think we should all go to Cape Cod or Nantucket or Martha's Vineyard and to go live this weekend and just see what happens.
Well, they're going to get hammered either way, I think, because even if this thing stays offshore, if the pressures get as low as some of the models are calling for, it's going to. And the thing is, this has a lot more fetch than your typical tropical storm, so they're going to get beat up pretty bad, even if it stays in the ocean.
I would love to be up there for one of these things. I've never experienced one, preferably a place where you've got a power source and you've got food, but I would, for once in my life, love to experience one of these things. But that's the big talk. Paul, when do you go above freezing up there?
It looks like it may not happen until next Monday, and then barely above freezing. 13 below tomorrow morning, about 18 below is where most of the models are settling in for Wednesday morning in the Twin Cities. If we get there, that will be the coldest morning so far this winter. We were 17 below back on January 7th. But interesting, I was talking with one of our other meteorologists here. The Twin Cities used to hit 20 below zero on average about 3 times a winter back in the early 1900s or around that time in those decades. Now it's on average more like once every 3 winters. So winter, as people know, is the fastest warming season in the north. And in Minnesota, our winters have warmed about 5 degrees since 1970. We're just not hitting 20 below in the Twin Cities as often, 40 below in northern Minnesota. And that's critical for northern Minnesota because in the forest, 40 below, the botanists tell us is a critical number because you're killing about 99% of the pine bark beetle larvae and emerald ash borer, things like that. So, hey, it's cold, but boy, it's good for the trees.
Paul, have you ever been to Embarrass, Minnesota?
I have not been to Embarrass, but they are, of course, legendary for the amount of cold they get up there.
I would love to visit one time just to say that I was there, the ice
Yeah.
box. It seems like they're consistently colder than International Falls now.
Yes, Embarrass, and there's a few other towns up there like Cook and Crane Lake, some low spots up in north central Minnesota that typically come in with the coldest readings for the state and many days the nation, the lower 48.
Bill Murray, ever been to Frostbite Falls, Minnesota?
No, but I used to love those Die Hard commercials in International Falls. Those were a highlight of winter football games for sure.
Classic.
Yep. So Jen, you've been you're agitated because of the snow.
I am agitated. We are in the Clipper system of the nation here right now. That's all we get are the Clippers coming in. It's a quick 1 to 2 inches, and then it just gets really cold. And that's what's happening here in the Ohio Valley. And it's not as cold as where Paul is, but it's cold for us. We're about 15 to 20 degrees below average with our temperatures, especially the lows. We should be right around 20. And tomorrow night, we're looking at 2 above and wind chills right around 10, 11 below. That's pretty cold for us. And it looks like for the next several nights, we'll be in the single digits. Not a lot of precipitation, just another Clipper, maybe Thursday night, Friday, and then we are dry for the weekend. At least it looks right now. We may get to 30 on Monday. So that's where we're at. That's where we're at here. The sun makes it feel great. We just get a little sunshine. It teases you that you want to go run around outside in the snow, but nah.
Sounds like wintertime. So Kim, let's see. Your husband's playing Minecraft, and you had to turn your camera off. But let's see if Kim will check in with a report from Norman.
You may make him really mad, so I would not let him hear that because I got a feeling he's doing more than playing Minecraft right now.
I have no idea what's going on, but can you guys hear me?
Loud and clear. Yes, you were 5 by 9.
Okay. I have to admit, I can only hear every third word or so that you can say, but I guess if you can hear every word that I can say, everything's fine. So I'll just give you, in this case, I can't hear any of the snarky things you guys might be saying, and that might work to my benefit. So I will just report that here in Norman, we had the last cold blast deeply affected us again. It was a very, very cold weekend, which keeps happening. And when you have small children, having very, very cold weekends is a very, very sad thing. But we've dramatically improved on the low temperatures being near single digits across much of central Oklahoma over the weekend, to now recovering to right now it's sitting 53 degrees and clear, not even torrential winds of any kind. The next couple of days look extremely pleasant, and I'm pretty excited for that.
And down here, Bill Murray, looks like we're going to be dry for a while.
Mm-hmm.
QPF shows basically nothing for 7 days, and maybe a pattern flip in about a week where temperatures go above average. So I'm kind of looking forward to that. It's been a pretty cold January down here too in the deep south.
I'm getting to ride the train home Friday night, so I'm kind of hoping that run through North Carolina. Again, I hope Amtrak's not listening. Don't cancel the train. But I'd like that run through Southern Virginia into North Carolina and upstate South Carolina that could generate some snowy train travel for me. So as long as no trees end up on the tracks, I'll be fine.
There you go. All right, let's do picks of the week. Then we'll go around the horn. Everybody share something that is related to weather. This can be a website, hardware, software, book, anything. You name it, we'll take it. So my pick of the week is a piece I wrote on Medium called The Hawaiian Blizzard Debacle back in December for the lunacy that went along with that blizzard warning for the Big Island summits. And that's what I was talking to our guest about earlier. So that's my pick of the week. So Jen, let's go to you for your pick of the week.
All right. Tornado Talk has produced 2 major summaries, both written by Nelson Tucker. I have to continue to give this kid a humongous kudos because he is just a brilliant writer and researcher, and he's poured his heart and soul into these. The first one is from the El Reno tornado from May 24th, 2011, and he did some phenomenal work, and he actually worked some with Rick Smith on this. And this is a premium summary on our site under the membership. But then we also put out a brand new free summary series on the Mullica Hill tornado from just last year. And it was the first EF3 in New Jersey in 31 years. And it's a 3-parter. We have an overview and then 3 chapters. We're going to start doing chapters because some of our summaries have gotten so long, we want to break it up where folks can read it in chunks. Nelson had the opportunity to go and survey some of the damage right after it happened. And so he has personal photos in that as well, and told the story of what happened. And this was spawned by Ida back in September of last year. So that's my pick of the week. Please go read it. It's wonderful, and you really get a good taste of the writing style of Tornado Talk and what our future goals are here in 2022 to really expand our storytelling.
Awesome. Great pick. And again, the links will be on the website, weatherbrains.com. Neil, what's your voice has done well tonight. It's hanging in there.
So my pick of the week, I think, is actually going to be the Bill LaPinta Memorial session that was at AMS today. There was several good talks. I mean, they were all awesome, but I think that since it's all virtual, they're all going to be archived online, and you should go check these out because there was a lot of great photos that people were sharing of Bill throughout his career, both in NOAA and NASA. And it was touching and entertaining, and a lot of people got choked up. It was a pretty special session.
Awesome. And I can't wait to watch that. And the AMS meeting goes on all this week, I would assume. And the nice thing about it, you can go back and look at the archived sessions later, which is a positive of all of this for those of us that are working this week. But again, we'll put the link up on weatherbrains.com. Okay. So Kim, what is your pick of the week? If you can hear us speaking to you.
Sure. My pick of the week, this is another time where I'm going to pick something that leans funny. My pick of the week is from The Onion. It's, sometimes there's this little bit of truth and humor that's worth paying attention to. And it's an article about the importance of probabilistic thinking. And I think the title actually is something like CDC announces plan to send every US household pamphlet on probabilistic thinking. And reading through it, you can definitely tell that they have some familiarity with my field where we risk decision science, where we can get very technical about probabilistic information very quickly. And it's a really nice reminder for me and all of us who are working in this intersection where we're trying to improve the communication of forecast uncertainty information, that if we ever get to the kind of extreme that this Onion article goes to describe what you need to do to actually understand probabilistic information, that we are not doing a good job of it. So I want to share that as a motivation to all of us. And it's just also, I think, because it is about the CDC and pandemic, just a nice bit of humor for everybody. Right now, everything is overwhelming. And if you feel overwhelmed, it's okay. You're not alone.
Anytime somebody picks the Onion as their pick of the week, that's a good pick right there. I like it. That's outstanding.
Well, we're just lucky Kim didn't hang up on us, James, because she's only hearing every third word. She might have heard something like that Tom Brady Gronkowski commercial for T-Mobile, where he only heard every other word and he came back to do a Super Bowl. But, she might have heard, Kim, are you picking your nose? And that she probably hung up on us.
She's hanging in there. All right. So, Paul, we've stalled here. Now we turn the floor over to you for some wonderful pick of the week. We know it's going to be a good one from MPR.
So in honor of winter and snow, my pick of the week is a great website called snowcrystals.com. Everything you've ever wanted to know about snow crystals, snowflakes, the physics. Dr. Ken Librecht, who is a Caltech physicist for decades, a North Dakota native, grows snow crystals in the lab, photographs them with microscopes, studies them, and breaks down the morphology of snowflakes, why stellar dendrites and hexagonal plates and needles grow and crystallize at different temperatures within the atmosphere. So there's a morphology diagram of snow crystals there. I don't know if you've had him as a guest yet, but he's terrific. Snowcrystals.com is the website.
Awesome. And Bill Murray's taking notes as you speak. All right, Bill, what's your pick of the week? Go.
Well, now we'll hear the official weekly test of the foghorn here on the WeatherBrains Weather Network. My picks of the week, James, are all the great guests coming up. And thanks tonight to Paul for hanging out for the whole show. That was awesome. Thanks to Dr. Businger for joining us also. We've moved Roger Hill to April 11th. Hopefully tornadoes won't get his attention during that time. We've added Chance Hayes, the WCM at Tulsa, who we hear has really great storm basic spotter training. He's going to talk to us. And thanks to Jeremy Bauer, we've added volcanologist Dr. Janine Nipner, I think I'm saying that right, from New Zealand. And as Dr. Jacobs pointed out, she works on a Mount Doom. That does not sound like a place you would want to be assigned to, Dr. Jacobs.
Not me.
I feel like we're on Mount Doom sometimes around here, but you know how that goes.
All right. Well, listen, thanks, everybody. This has been a fun show tonight. For those that are new, we typically produce WeatherBrains Monday nights at 8 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Central. A lot of people watch it, live.bigbrainsmedia.com, but we know that most of you listen to this show. So thank you so much. If you want to get in touch with us, the email address, it is email@weatherbrains.com. And all of the picks of the week, the show notes will be up on weatherbrains.com as well. So thanks for watching and listening. On behalf of the entire WeatherBrains crew, I'm James Spann. Thanks for listening. Have a great week and God bless.
Outstanding. Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, you, Paul. Nice to meet you.
Thank you. I'm lucky to spend time with you. Thank you so much. You guys are amazing. Thanks for inviting me.
Come back anytime. We'd love to